Hi, my name's Londe Yusuf.
And my name is Reggie Williams.
And we're the co-founders of Black Film Space. Black Film Space is a grassroots organization dedicated to enhancing the skill sets of Black filmmakers and building a community of creatives. We host events such as screenwriting workshops, panels, mixers, and other events that are designed to support Black content creators.
In the next episode of the Black Film Space podcast, we interview Charlese Antoinette, a professional costume designer and stylist. Charlese has worked on See You Yesterday, Raising Dion, and Astronomy Club. We talk with Charlese about the different positions within the wardrobe department, her process of working with the director, color coordination, and much more. And now, on to our interview.
Hi, Charlese. Thanks for joining us for our podcast today.
Thank you for having me. It's my pleasure.
Of course, of course. Let's just jump right in and talk about your start and how you got into the industry.
I started off as an intern back when you could still have interns on projects. Now you can't intern specifically in costume departments anymore because
Really?
Yeah, the interns on the movie Black Swans sued, and they said that they helped to construct garments and that they didn't get paid. So now the industry is like no interns ever again, which kind of sucks because I learned a lot as an intern, and being an intern actually led to paid work. Because the thing about working in this industry is you kind of have to learn a lot of the way things go on the job. Like they don't really teach it all in school, especially when it comes to costume design. There's only a few schools. I think Ohio has like a really good program. I can't remember the university, but yeah, like most of the costume design programs are geared towards theater, like Broadway. So the process by which you design costumes for a film, a lot of times you learn most of it on the job.
Wow, that's insane. So what is the alternative now? Like instead of interns, what are they doing?
So you can get a job as a production assistant in a costume department, but even that's a really competitive job because a lot of times we don't want to hire someone who's never worked on a project ever, because the production assistant is definitely, one of the backbones of the department. They're doing a lot. They're doing a lot of support functions, and it's just really hard sometimes to stop and teach someone every little thing. The cool thing about me being an intern is I worked directly with the production assistant, and she taught me how to be a production assistant. And then from there, I went on to be a production assistant, and then a costume coordinator, and then an assistant costume designer, a costume shopper, and then a costume designer. So I literally did most of the job functions in the costume department. And that's how I was able to be a better designer, to be honest.
Okay, you kind of we're jumping ahead in the interview here, so let's get back to how you started, and then we'll talk about those other things.
So what prompted you to even desire this career path?
I went to college for fashion, merchandising, and marketing, and I always wanted to be a designer. And initially, I thought I wanted to be a fashion designer, but like my whole family talked me out of getting a design degree. They were like, you need this. So I went to school for fashion, merchandising, and marketing, and I have a business degree. And it was great actually to learn the business of fashion. But when I moved to New York, I was working as a product developer, so a product assistant for Macy's. And I got recruited out of college, and it was great. And I got to move to New York, but I got to New York and I was like, I don't want to do corporate fashion in this way. I want to be creative. And I actually learned about Stylist while I was in school, because the Style Network was a thing. And at the time, the Style Network actually, it had a lot of interviews of stylists, and it showed, the people they were dressing. And I was like, wow, this is really cool. This is a whole new world I never even knew existed. And this was in like the early 2000s. And then I also would watch endless runway shows. There's fashion television. I mean, it was really dope. It was like I had like a separate education on the Style Network, which was really cool. So when I moved to New York, I was like really excited about Fashion Week, and I was really excited about, you know, finding out how to become a stylist. So I ended up quitting my job, and I was like, so how do I become a stylist? I took a course at FIT to get my portfolio started, and, you know, did a bunch of shoots with various photographers, did some editorials. I would style like up and coming musicians all the time. And it just wasn't, it was cool and I enjoyed it, but I always was like, something's missing. And I think the thing that was missing for me was like the storytelling element. I always loved film and I always was attracted to the costumes in film, but I never really understood that that was a job I could actually do. You know, I'm a young Black woman from suburban Maryland. Like, I don't know anybody that works in the film industry. I don't know any costume designers. So I didn't even like realize that was a job I could actually do until I moved to New York, and I would literally walk around the city and be like, wow, there's movies and TV shows shooting everywhere. And I was like, oh, okay. So how do I become a costume designer? Like, I'm already a stylist. How do I become a costume designer? And I literally would ask any and everyone in the fashion industry. I mean, I remember I used to work Fashion Week. I did Fashion Week for like 10 seasons, working backstage at multiple designers' shows. And I would just like network and talk to people. And one day this woman came up to me, I guess she overheard me talking to someone, and was like, hey, do you want to intern on a film? And I was like, yeah, you know, at the time I was able to. I had like a flexible schedule because I had like literally quit my job to pursue costume design and styling full time. And that's how I ended up interning on a film, and that's how I got my start. Yeah.
That's so cool. That's fate working in your favor for sure.
Yeah.
That's so dope. What is it about film that you are attracted to?
Definitely storytelling through clothing. There's so much you can learn about a character based off of what they're wearing, how the clothes are aged, what colors they wear, the kinds of fabrics that they wear, you know, what their shoes look like. How, if their shoes are like, you know, really worn in, like that means the person, you know, doesn't really, either they don't have much money or they don't care much about, you know, shoes. They just wear the same thing until they wear it to death, and then they get a new one. So there's so many interesting things that you can learn about a person through their clothing. Like, people watching is like one of my favorite things. I like to see what people are wearing and how they're wearing it, and how the clothes are breaking down over time, how things are aging and what that looks like, because it's important when you're doing a movie or a show and you're aging things. Like, it needs to look real, it needs to look authentic, it needs to look like a real person wore it and it's broken down over time. So I really enjoy that part of it. I enjoy the clothes telling their own story. I enjoy, you know, working with color palettes and creating a color palette for the world that we are creating a color palette for each specific character, because each specific character has their own color palette based off of their own, you know, personal motivations and their mood and you know, the tone. And, you know, so it's, for me, it's a lot of fun. It's a lot of fun. Like, it gets super nerdy and heady, and it's creative at the same time. So it kind of stimulates both sides of my brain.
So, can you talk about how you started, what it was like when you initially started working on films, especially with like more indie projects? Like, how did you generate like a color palette with such like with limited budgets? What did you source to kind of create a look for for the project?
So when I started working as an assistant, I wasn't working on indie projects. I didn't work on an indie project until I costume designed my first film. And it was honestly shocking because I was like used to working on projects that had like not endless money, but a lot more money than what I had.
Right.
When I did Newlyweds, I had $10,000 to do all the costumes in the movie, and
Wow.
That's not a lot of money.
I was gonna say, why is Richie saying wow?
That sounds like a lot to me. I think I had like $100. I had like $200 for my short film.
This was a feature, and it was like very rich, and it was very Brooklyn, and there was a lot of like supporting cast, and like, you know, to For a comparison, the project I just finished, the Fred Hampton project, my costume budget was $375,000.
Wow.
And even that was low based off what we were doing, because it was period and we had thousands of background and hundreds of principals. So yeah, so going from a project where, you know, a lot of the budgets were like TV shows, and I was an assistant, so I would see the budgets and I would, you know, help track money and stuff like that as a coordinator, and seeing like a show that spent 40K per episode and then going to a show that, or a movie that's 10K, you have to get really, really crafty. And what's really, really important is your resources and knowing where to get everything and anything at any time. Like your resources are everything. And also knowing how to stretch money, you know, based off of those resources. So I was able to stretch the money on that project because I knew of places that like sold clothing by the pound, for example. And it was things that I could, you know, dye or deconstruct and remake. And just like really just like just nickeling and diming it, you know, to be honest. And sometimes that may stifle creativity, but in my case, like I kind of get a rush from the challenge, you know, I get a rush from having to make something happen with like little to no money and make it look expensive. Like I'm really good at that. And it's really exciting for me to be able to do it. So a lot of it is like knowing your resources, having technical skills, like, you know, knowing how to sell, knowing how to dye things, knowing how to age things, like just with nothing. Like you can use coffee to age things. You can use tea to age things. Like you don't
explain. How do you do that?
So if you have like a white t-shirt and white is too brilliant white because your character has had this shirt for a while, you can do a tea dye. You can do a tea bath and dye the shirt so it kind of yellows and ages. And
so you put it in like a bucket of like tea
water. Yep. So, you know, yeah, that's why it's really, really important to have, you know, the technical know-how and the skills, because when you are doing these indie projects and you have to stretch money, you know, you have to do that. Also, it worked in my favor having all the relationships with the showrooms that I had from when I was a stylist, because they would let me pull a lot of clothes for free. And then they would let me buy a lot of the clothing at the end for like a really inexpensive price, because they were like, you know what, it's the end of the season, you know, we're not going to use this anymore. You can have it, or you can buy it for 20, 30 bucks. So a lot of it is definitely like leveraging your relationships, using your resources, having the technical skills. When it comes to colors and color palettes, I mean, honestly, budget doesn't really affect, you know, color and color palette. What budget really affects is how much clothing you can possibly procure and like the story that you can tell with the clothing. So you might have to repeat a lot more stuff, you know, if you're only finding X amount of clothing that's within your color palette and you've like dyed a bunch of other stuff and you're like, well, this is it. This is this person's closet. And we're just going to have to, you know, pair this shirt with this pant, pair this jacket with this shirt and pant look. Like you just kind of recycle clothing, because that's what a real person would do anyway. So it works in your favor a lot of times.
What's a good budget?
It depends on what you're doing in your project. So it's really hard for me to say what a good budget is unless you send me your script and I do a breakdown and I'm like, this is how much it's going to cost.
But on average, like a studio project, obviously like their wardrobe and, you know, budget would be in the millions, I'm assuming.
It depends.
Generally.
Yeah, it depends. Like if you're doing something Marvel, yeah, definitely. Because the movie I did was 25 to 30 million. And then my budget was like 375,000.
So you got a really small fraction of the budget. Maybe they realized the nature of the story didn't require like extensive costuming.
No, that's not true. I had to fight for that money.
Oh, really? Okay.
They tried to give me 200K to begin with, and I had to fight to get it up to 375.
Really? Okay. That's so interesting.
Yeah, they definitely have like a methodology and a target. Yeah. So I believe it is 1%. And yeah, I had to fight to get more money because I was like, the way the movie is written and the way the director wants this executed, I'm not going to be able to do it for that much based off the amount of characters, based off of the amount of times we see the characters in the movie, based off of the amount of background we have that have to all be dressed in period clothing head to toe.
Right.
You know, because period is its own animal. Like when you do a contemporary film and you have thousands of background, for the most part, they're bringing like their own base layers. You know, they can wear their own pants, they can wear their own shoes. And some of them show up with like really great outfits. And you're like, great, I can use that. This is contemporary. But when you're doing period, you spend more money on everything because everything has to be authentic. So yeah, it's a little trickier. Like you need more money for period. You need more money for sci-fi. Contemporary, you can kind of like budget when it comes to your background.
Within the costume department, who is breaking the budget down? Like within that $375,000 for the Fred Hampton project, like who's breaking like where the money's going to specifically, and then also where is that money going to exactly?
I break it down initially, and then we do another round with the wardrobe supervisor, because the wardrobe supervisor has like, you know, their own input, and they are going to think about things that I'm not going to necessarily think about. You know, I'm thinking about like my principals and how many changes they have. From there, me and the wardrobe supervisor sit down together and, you know, do another round, and then we'll submit a final budget to the producers for approval. The majority of the budget usually goes to your principal characters. And let's say, like, for example, on the Fred Hampton project, Lakeith had like 40 changes. He had 40 appears on camera 40 times in different days and different. So, you know, if you're thinking about how many times he's appearing on camera and it's period clothing, and let's say, for example, we're like, okay, if we're renting period clothing, like head to toe, we can pull this off for $200. That's a like nice chunk of money already. We also spend money on, you know, materials. Obviously, we spend money on aging and dyeing. We spend money on repairs, you know, things being repaired, shoe repairs. We spend money on, oh my God, we spend money on a lot of stuff, just anything that pertains to clothing. We don't spend money on food, and that usually is a separate budget. The labor does not come out of our budget. That's a separate budget. You know, in the end, it is counted as parts of the whole, but, you know, that specific amount of, you know, 375, we designated it just to our principal costumes, background, supplies, and like repairs, laundering clothing.
For a period piece, like where are you getting the clothes from? Are they like manufactured specifically for the project?
In an ideal world, you have a costume shop, you have multiple tailors, and you have time. In this project, I didn't have a lot of time to prep. I had like 5 weeks, and, you know, definitely could have used, you know, more if we had a bigger budget. We could have, you know, used more time. But the other thing that was tricky about the project is I started in LA and we were shooting in Cleveland. So I spent like the first couple weeks in LA, and me and my key costumer, Alexis, went to pretty much every costume house in LA and pulled as much as we could, you know, as much stock as we could. And stock meaning anything that was in our color palette that was the late 60s, early 70s. Because the thing about the late 60s is you can get away with some pieces that are early 70s because they would have been introduced in 69.
I was gonna say, yeah, it kind of blends those time periods.
Yeah. And like, you know, we will reserve those pieces that that felt more early 70s for specific, you know, characters or points in the film, people who are a little bit more, you know, fashionable, had a little bit more money, you know, stuff like that. So yeah, we pulled from, I want to say, at least 6 different costume houses in LA and shipped a lot of it to Cleveland. And then luckily Cleveland had a lot of great 60s and a lot of great vintage. I also had a shopper who was out of Atlanta, pulling in Atlanta, and then she was also pulling out of Columbus, Ohio, because there's some great vintage resources there. And then when we got to Cleveland, we were shopping a lot in Cleveland. And even while we were in Cleveland, we would have someone periodically in LA shipping us stuff, you know, if it was something really specific and we needed it really last minute, you know, like we had all these cops, Chicago police. So we couldn't find that in Cleveland. We couldn't find it in Atlanta. And, you know, we didn't have the time to make all the uniforms. So we had to get stuff shipped from Western and CRC and LA and MPCC, which are they're all costume houses in LA. So it was a lot of moving parts. It's kind of nuts.
I was gonna say, this sounds intense.
Yeah.
How much you said 5 weeks was not enough. How much time do you think you would need?
I think it would have been cool to get 8 to 10. I don't know if it's realistic on this budget, but just because it's period, like we would have been able to make more clothing for our principals and, you know, potentially make all the cop uniforms, you know, outsource that. Yeah, we were in like a time crunch from the beginning.
And how many people worked with you on this film?
So in my department, it was myself, it was an assistant costume designer.
Mm-hmm.
I had a costume supervisor. I had 2 tailors at one point, and then when our man days ran out, we were back to 1. I had a PA, production assistant. I had a key costumer, and then I had another costumer who were constantly doing background fittings. And that was in the office. And then also in the office, we had an Asia dyer for like a couple of weeks. And then on set, it was a truck costumer and then 2 principal costumers. And then on background days, we would have like 2 background costumers.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
It's a lot of people. So I just counted.
And it still wasn't enough.
14 or 15 people.
Yeah, and it still wasn't enough. I mean, honestly, like we made it happen, but we were all working our asses off.
It was tight, basically.
Yeah, definitely.
What is a costumer exactly?
So what a costumer is the person that takes care of the clothing after the fitting and after the costume is picked by myself and the director. The costumer then takes care of the clothing from there on out. So they're the ones, you know, tracking the clothing, writing down the descriptions, making sure it's organized on the truck. They're taking care, and if they're on set, they're taking care of actors on set. And, you know, just keeping track of all their things. They're setting their trailers every day with their costumes. And so that's specifically like what a set costumer does. Like they're basically, I hand off the bag with the outfit, which we call a change. And there's a tag on the bag with the description of the scene number, with the script day, character name, actor's name. So it's super organized. So I pass that off to them, and from then on, they're caring for the garments, right? Costumers who work in the office, sometimes they're shopping. A lot of times in our case, we had a lot of background, so they were doing fittings all day long. Like we had 20 racks of clothing that they were pulling from to do background fittings every day.
Wow.
Yeah, costumers can also, you know, do aging and dyeing. Costumers are also really responsible for like organizing of the clothing in the office, you know, checking things in as they come in and out from the costume houses, you know, packing things up to be returned to the costume houses. So, you know, the set costumers and the key costumers and office costumers, their jobs are like a little different. But, you know, for the most part, they're all just taking care of the clothing. You know, once it's in the room, once it's in, you know, in our office, once it's on set, like they're always taking care of the clothing.
Mm-hmm. And what about the wardrobe supervisor?
So the wardrobe supervisor basically does all the stuff that I can do, but I don't want to do.
Yeah, I knew you were gonna say that.
Because no, you know why? Because it's just too much. Like it's too much trying to manage the logistics and then also, you know, interfacing with the director and the producers and, you know, the actors. Like my job is to set the look my job is to, come up with the concepts and, create these create these characters, with the director, or in the case of a showrunner. So like that's enough. I have a lot on my plate already to begin with, dealing with, various people when it comes to creating these characters, because actors have input, directors, showrunners have input. I have to generate ideas, I have to put together presentations, I have to do fittings and then present the fittings, you know what I mean? Like it's a lot of work. So trying to manage everybody in the department and the logistical part, it's just kind of impossible, especially like on a bigger and bigger project. When I was on smaller indie projects, it's a little easier, because it's a little scaled back, but it's still a lot, trying to manage where everyone should be at every time, and even where all the clothes are going and where they're coming from. So the wardrobe supervisor manages the majority of the department. The people in the department, they're the one who are making sure the clothes get to the truck. They're making sure that the truck is stocked and has everything it needs. They're making sure the office is organized. They're making sure everybody is meeting deadlines and doing what they need to do. And me and the supervisor, we are like constantly talking about our workflow and like what is needed when, what goes on camera on what day. So, okay, if this shirt goes on camera on Tuesday and it needs to be aged, so that needs to go in the front of the line because Tuesday is tomorrow, So stuff like that. So they're really just like the logistical, like right hand person. And costume supervisors usually have like really good technical skills as well. They can usually sew, they can usually age and dye. A lot of them like used to be costumers and have now become wardrobe supervisors. They track the budget and the money. Like they're really on top of that. They're making sure all the receipts are getting done, and and usually we have a costume coordinator to like do the actual paperwork part. But it's the wardrobe supervisor's job to handle logistics, manage the department, and track the money.
Can you talk about your relationship with the director throughout the course of a project? How do you collaborate with them? How do you negotiate with them? How do you deal with them maybe having a lot of input on the look for the projects?
Sure. So, directors and costume designers, in my opinion, we have like this really awesome collaborative relationship. And it's important that, the director that you're working with trusts you as a professional, because if not, it can get really, really challenging. And I try my best to only work with directors who are going to trust me as a professional and not micromanage me, because I've definitely worked with directors in the past that have micromanaged me. And I say micromanage because, there's a difference between being collaborative and micromanaging people. I'm collaborative, right, and I have no problem being collaborative. I'm not one of those costume designers that's like, no, it has to be, everything I say my way and I shoot down other people's ideas. I'm not that kind of costume designer, and not specifically with the director and the showrunner. Like they have a lot of input. And, and some directors and showrunners are more involved than others because they know clothes. And then others are like, I don't know. You know what I mean? So it really just depends on who you're working with. Like, for example, a director I collaborate with a lot, Shaka King, he loves clothes. He loves color. Like, so we have really, really fun collaborative conversations. I'm currently working with Chuatel on his project, and we're doing like Corona weekly Zoom sessions. And, he's very detail oriented. He's going through the script line by line, like, okay, what should this person wear here? What do you think about this? And like, that's, for me, that's really cool, because I definitely have a vivid imagination, and I definitely can imagine in a world, on my own. But, the large part of what I enjoy about being a costume designer and working in the film industry is how collaborative it is. It's fun, Like, I don't want to sit in a room and necessarily work by myself. I don't work well that way, you know, but working with people who are collaborative, who also respect me as a creative and I respect them, it's the best.
What is the optimal process for you as a costume designer? Like how, like from the preparation point, like, can you walk us through the preparation process with the director and how you collaborate?
We can start from like me doing like the initial pitch to do the job. So what I usually do when I get an interview for a project, I do like an initial pitch. So I'll put together like a presentation, you know, it may be like a PowerPoint kind of presentation. And I may even, you know, sketch a thing or two if I am, you know, if I'm really, really, really trying to sell them on like a particular perspective or idea, I'll sketch something out as well. But for the most part, providing visual references and having a starting point for you and the director or showrunner to talk about in the interview is so key. Because for me, that's how I learned how this person works and collaborates. And, you know, it's very, you know, as much as like you want to get a job, I really think it's really, really important if as you're being interviewed, you're kind of interviewing the other person. So, you know, I had an interview recently with Charles Stone, the third, and he and I had so much fun. And it was a job interview, you know, and I was like, oh God, this would be so great to work together because we're having fun just going through these costume references that I put together. So that's the starting point. And usually from there, I can tell by how the conversation goes in that interview with, you know, by looking at the costume references I put together, if I'm going to get the job or not. Based off of how collaborative and fun the conversation is. 9 times out of 10, if we're having fun in the interview, collaborating already, I'm getting the job. So from there, we just kind of continue that process, and we'll go through the script like line by line and talk about everyone and everything that's happening in the story. And I'll ask tons of questions, you know, because a lot of times I work with directors that also have written the material. So they're a great resource because, you know, I'm asking questions like, okay, well, what does this person do for a living? And, you know, how old is this person? And like, what do they do for fun? And like, you know, just all kinds of questions that would give me insight into why they would wear what they're wearing. So, you know, we go through that. We'll go through the whole script. And then from there, I will put together like folders and folders and folders and folders of pictures. And then we'll go back again and we'll look through everything. And the director or showrunner will be like, yeah, I like this. I like that. I like this. I like that. And, you know, let's expand on this and let's expand on that. And then I'll put together boards. I'll we'll finalize sketches, and then we'll start procuring clothing. Or, you know, making clothing based off of the sketches. I usually do a combination of both. And once I have like a decent amount of clothing acquired, I'll walk the director or showrunner through the closets and show them like, okay, do you like this? What about that? Let's talk about this. Let's talk about that. Get some feedback, and then keep going. And then we start having fittings. And then, you know, and some directors want to be in the fittings and some don't. A lot of them don't have time. I just read somewhere that Arian Phillips, who did Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, like Quentin Tarantino likes to be a part of the fittings. And I thought that was really, really interesting. And I imagine it could be really, really fun. So yeah, we'll do fittings. I'll have like a bunch of photos after the fittings, and, you know, I'll organize them, and then I'll have another meeting with the director, or if the director's not available, again, everything's digital now. So we just send folders of fittings, and, you know, and I'll explain and usually put together a presentation with the fitting photos, what scenes I'm thinking for which change, and, you know, options for various scenes, and, you know, things like that. And the director will give me, you know, notes and feedback. And then from there, we're able to assign changes to specific scenes. The thing about this process is nothing is final until it goes on camera. So even things that are quote unquote rejects, like, you kind of keep around, because there's so many times where the director or showrunner would be like, hey, remember that jacket you showed me? Or remember that shirt?
Yeah.
Ain't got it.
Actually, it will work better. So you always hold on. You always have extra stuff. You always like have things in your back pocket. You know, the scripts are constantly being rewritten. So out of nowhere, there'll be a new script day and a new scene. You know what I mean? So you just have to have extra changes and extra pieces of clothing just in case. And you create a closet for your characters, you know, after the fitting. You have like you know, like normal people have closets. We have closets for our characters. So we have changes that are assigned and organized in bags, and then we'll have extra clothing because it's a closet.
Like, what are some examples of being micromanaged without naming any names?
It's really just if everything you show a person they're just like not happy with, and you've had like multiple conversations with them about like the direction and they agreed to it. Like that's really frustrating because it's like, hey, this is the direction we said we were going in, and now you've like switched up and you're just like, I hate it, you know, I don't, you know, and yeah, like those are like the most difficult situations because it's like there's nothing you can do to, you know, to please that person. And it's honestly not my job to please you. It's my job to collaborate and create characters together. Like we should both be pleased with.
So how do you work through that obstacle, that challenge of the director not being pleased, even though you've communicated that you would go in that direction?
You just have to suck it up and
really,
and just keep playing investigator, psychologist until you get place. Wow. It's not easy, and I don't wish it on any creatives because it's not easy, and you kind of, you know, sometimes you eventually get to a place where you're like, okay, I get this person now. But other times you're just like, you know what, I wouldn't work with this person again, you know? So you, at some point, sometimes you just kind of suck it up and you're just like, whatever, I just got to get through this, which sucks. I don't have any constructive advice for that.
Can we talk more about what it's like to be an assistant costume designer and what makes a good costume designer?
Yeah. So I was assistant costume designer for about a year. And what makes a good assistant costume designer is basically you have to know the script, you have to understand the schedule, and you have to be really, really good at anticipating like the needs of the department. And that comes with experience. And also just being just really supportive to the costume designer. So a lot of what you're doing is like organizing photos, doing research, organizing fittings, shopping, setting up the fittings, taking notes in fittings, and you know, even taking photos in fittings. Sometimes, you know, you may or may not be helping to you may be doing fittings on your own a lot of times too, with with like other characters, whether it be, you know, featured background. When I was assistant costume designer, I would do like a lot of fittings with featured background. I would do a lot of fittings with, you know, principal characters or day players, because a lot of times there's so much going on where the costume designer has to be on set establishing. And establishing is when the actor wears something for the first time. The costume designer has to be there to answer questions and to make sure it looks good, right? So if you're establishing and, you know, you have like other principals that are day players coming in, you can't do both. So a lot of times the assistant costume designer is doing fittings with day players and things like that. So being a good assistant costume designer, you just really need to know what's going on and be able to say to the costume designer, like, hey, we have this day player this day. We need to, you know, I'm scheduling a fitting, like, you know, taking a lot of your own initiative and helping with, you know, the moving parts, interfacing with the, you know, costume supervisor, the wardrobe supervisor, with those logistics when it specifically comes to actors and fittings and stuff like that, because it's a lot, and it's a lot for the wardrobe supervisor to track as well, so assistant costume designers really have to be on top of like the fittings, the shopping, um, and just making sure that everyone knows what characters are wearing once the outfits are chosen, like, and organizing it and getting it together and talking to this costume supervisor, wardrobe supervisor, so it gets to the truck. Like, so it's a really interesting support function to a costume designer.
I wanted to talk to you about your relationship with the actors, and if at any point they have any sort of significant input.
Yeah, absolutely. So the fitting is where me and the actor usually meet, and we usually, create the character together. So, the director or showrunner and I, we definitely have like our ideas and stuff like that, but we don't really know how things are going to look or come off until we see it on a body. So in the fitting, that's when we are really honing in and creating characters. And I'm so lucky to have been able to work with Lakeith and Daniel Kaluuya on the Fred Hampton project, because they're just so great. Like, they just think about so many things in terms of their characters. Like in the fitting, like when Lakeith would put on clothing, his walk would change, how he would change. And it really sold the costumes, because every photo I took of him, he had like his pose down. I took video of him to send to the director. So his fittings, even though he had like, 40 changes, like, and we did like 2 4-hour fittings with him. Like, wow. After those 2 4-hour fittings, like, we pretty much had it. And, that doesn't always happen. Sometimes you have to keep going, sometimes it's like, oh, we're not quite there yet. But he was just so cool and collaborative and was just down. Like, he would put on anything. He was like, yeah, I like that. Yeah, let's do it,
Right.
But, I also, also because of the conversations that me and the director had, I was able to really hone in and, really do a lot of like the prep work and being really specific as to like what I wanted him to wear for particular scenes, so that helps as well. Like, the more work you do before the fitting, the better you're going to be. So yeah, like, they do have input. They have ideas, they have input. Like, if it makes sense, I'm with it. If it doesn't make sense for the character, I will be like, I don't know if that makes sense or works, but 9 times out of 10, like, they have good ideas, because, they've been, they've really been like sitting with these characters. They've been researching, so like, I don't think I've ever had any crazy, well, that's not true. The only times that the requests are crazy is if someone asks for something we just can't afford. You kind of have to play, again, you have to kind of play psychologist, so sometimes, if an actor's like really like adamant about it, and you're like, all right, fine, like, I will give in this one way,
Right. Right.
So, you kind of have to feel it out. But for the most part, like I said, actors are like, I think I should have a set of keys in my pocket all the time. And I'm like, okay, cool, I'll tell props. So like they're like, I think I should be reading this specific book in this scene. And I'm like, okay, cool, I'll tell props. They'll have a lot of ideas that they'll tell me in fittings, and some of them are costume ideas and some of them are prop ideas. I should be wearing a hat, don't you think? Oh yeah, sure, we have hats, let's throw a hat on,
Right.
So yeah, it's really fun and collaborative.
So fitting. It sounds like fun.
Yeah, when it's fun, it's fun. When it's hard, it's hard.
Yeah. I'm sure it's all subjective based on like, the talent, their personality, their mood for the day, their relationship with the director. I mean, there's so many factors that impact experiences like that, during the production process. So
yeah, I mean, I try my best to create a really comfortable environment, because I know like that's everything. If they come into an environment that's chaotic, it's not going to work. So, you know, we try to have a really comfortable, really organized space. You know, outfits are put together in advance. You know what I mean? Just like, because some actors hate fittings. Some actors
Okay.
hate fittings, and it's nothing personal. They're just like, you know, and for various reasons. Like, some people have like, you know, body image issues. Some people
Okay.
don't like taking off clothes that many times in an hour. So like the more organized and the more you know, simple you can make it, and the more you can make it a comfortable environment. I try to like put music on. I'm like, hey, what music do you want to listen to? You know, like little things like that can help like set the tone and like make them feel comfortable. You know, I try to like really like get to know them, you know, during the fitting, and gain their trust, because like once they trust me as the costume designer, they'll pretty much wear anything I want. Um, no, seriously, like once they trust that like you have good taste and that you really are thinking about the characters and you're thinking about the script in a certain way, because some of them have had really bad experiences, unfortunately. So, you know, you have to really keep that. And that's what I say. I try to take it personal, and I try to keep it in mind, and just really create a comfortable environment, and just be like, hey, I won't, you know, I've even had to say to a couple people like, hey, I won't ever like have you looking bad on camera.
Of course. Yeah, no.
You have to say it sometimes, because people have had bad experiences. So you kind of have to really be like, hey, you know, you can trust me on this. Like I wouldn't do this to you. You know, I had to tell. I remember I took over a show, and like the lead actress was kind of traumatized from the previous costume designer, and
Wow.
yeah, and I was like, hey, you know, and she was like, kind of aggressive the first time we had a conversation, and her and I are so cool now. You know, it was just like I said, it had nothing to do with me. And at one point I had to be like, hey girl, I'm not here to fight with you over clothes. I just want to make you look good, and I want the project to look good. And once I said that, she calmed down.
Got
So,
it.
you know, you kind of have to like gain people's trust, because you know, we're all artists, we're all emotional.
Mm-hmm.
It's a lot. It's a lot. And I know, and actors, they deal with a lot, you know, they deal with a lot of people, and some people are nicer to them than others. And they're human beings at the end of the day. So I just try to like treat them with respect, because sometimes they don't get treated with respect, which is crazy, you know. Um, but yeah, like yeah, people have had a lot of different experiences, and you just kind of have to keep that in mind and not take it personal sometimes.
Mm. Can we talk about colors and how it affects the story? Um, and it'd be great if we could talk about See You Yesterday.
Yeah.
And so can you just, I guess, talk about um the color, like the main character, the girl, she has kind of like on this
Hmm.
maroon type of costume. So like why that color? And yeah.
We decided that CJ and Sebastian's primary colors were red, black, and green. And so
Ah.
so they wear a lot of red, black, and green. And then Sebastian wears red, green, and yellow as well, because he's Caribbean. Um, so that was like an intentional choice. So I like, you know, as a foundation, that's what they wear a lot, especially when they start jumping back and forth through time, because you know what they're doing is like a political act. You know what I mean? And so we basically decided, me, Stefan, and the production designer, we decided that by the end of the story, CJ gets darker. So that red, she wears like that red Wandisha t-shirt early on, right? So by the end, she's wearing maroon, which is a darker red, right?
Right.
Uh,
Right.
so that was intentional, because we really wanted to show at the beginning that they're kids, and like, and that the colors they are wearing are like really bright and poppy and vibrant because they're kids. But by the end of the movie, all these things have happened, you know, she's experienced loss and like, you know, traveled back and forth through time and, you know, and tried to save her brother all these times. She's grown up in a sense, like she's matured, you know? So by the end, the colors are a little darker.
Do colors also affect, because this is more for the character, but is this also, are you guys also thinking about how the audience is feeling, like the mood that they're that you are intending to have them feel during these scenes and during the progress of the movie?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. So, you know, in the beginning of the movie, it's like poppy and optimistic. You know, it's like these cool Brooklyn kids who are science prodigies built this time machine. How cool, how adorable, right? But then shit gets real. And if you rewatch the film now that we've had this conversation, I think you'll see it. Shit gets real, and like their clothing gets darker and darker and darker. CJ and Sebastian, like the more they jump through time, and so and even like the way the movie is shot, you know, the lighting and stuff starts to change as well. So like the first time we see them and they're at school and it's sunny and it's like everyone's in poppy colors and their friend comes up and he's like really like vibrant and, you know, and crazy. And so, you know, you get this, like I said, this feeling that they're fun, young kids and they're just being kids, but, you know, funerals happen and the colors get dark in that section. And then like from then on out, like their colors aren't as vibrant at all. And like I said, and like the color of the lighting, the settings, like things start to change. Another thing to note is that when CJ is at home with her family, like with her mom, we use like more like earth tones and like pastels in their colors in their environment because we wanted the home to have a specific feeling as well. We wanted her home setting to feel completely different from outside and completely different from you know, her time jumps. So the only time you see kind of those pastels and stuff are at home. And then also her brother, when he gets shot, he's wearing those pastels.
I didn't even notice all those details in See You Yesterday, so I'm definitely going to watch it again with a different eye and look at the colors and how it impacted my viewing experience from a more conscious standpoint, because I'm sure it impacted me unconsciously. Can you talk about how you integrate your career with like your lifestyle? Like what's a day-to-day, you know, life for Charlese? And then also, do you work on more than one project at once? Like how do you juggle your schedule and everything?
So I would say that it's still kind of a struggle for me managing my day-to-day and my career because of the amount of hours that I work. I'm still figuring it out, to be honest. And I'm definitely at a place now where like for a long time I was like, you know, hustling, you know, and like and struggling. And I was just like, wow, I just have to work. I just have to work. I have to work. And I'm now getting to a place where I can say no more and just prioritize myself and my self-care a little bit more. You know, like my mother was like, you sacrificed a lot to get to where you are, you know, and sometimes you just kind of have to do that for a period of time. And once you get to a kind of almost like a plateau, you know, for me, it's like, this is the time to think about, you know, other things. Like I'm thinking about things in terms of like, how many projects do I want to do a year? Realistically, because I've been doing 3 to 4 projects a year and that's a lot. It's a bit much. So, you know, I'm thinking about saying no more. I'm also thinking about the kinds of projects that I want to take moving forward because I am building a body of work. You know, for me, it's very, very, very important to just make sure like I'm engaging in the basic self-care, you know, making sure I'm eating regularly, I'm staying hydrated, I'm exercising. And, you know, it can be challenging working 60, 80 hours a week, but I'm forcing myself to prioritize that because it's so easy to just get up and go because there's so much to do, you know, like there's so much to do. You're getting emails all night long. You know what I mean? Like, and you wake up the next day, and if the first thing you do is check your phone, like that's it. So, you know, I'm trying my best to change that behavior and, you know, wake up and meditate first and eat and then work. You know what I mean? Because, you know, we are kind of workaholics in this industry. I mean, we thrive on work and we thrive on accomplishments, but you know, if you don't take care of yourself, you're not going to be able to, you know, last long. You're going to burn out. So for me right now,
Right.
my biggest priority is making sure I'm making my self-care and myself as much of a priority as I do my career. And that's new for me because it was just all about achieving, you know, it's like, I gotta get to this place. And I got to the place, or, you know, and I'm like, oh, wow. I have not been prioritizing my self-care. I have not been prioritizing, you know, my family and friends and people in my life. And I felt really bad about it, to be honest. And that's why the conversation I had with my mother was great, because she was like, you had to sacrifice to get to this place. And now that you're here, you can open your life up, you know, and think about these things and, you know, manage it a little bit better. So with that, like right now, no, I'm not doing two projects at once. I think like maybe in a few years when I have, when things are going a little bit, you know, not necessarily smoother, but just when I have like two, because it requires you working with two separate teams of people that you really trust. Right now I have one. And it's taken me this many years to kind of build to that. And you know, and like, yeah, it takes a little bit of work. It's not, you know, it's not ideal doing two projects at once, to be honest. Some people do it and they do a great job at it, but it's because they have multiple teams of people that they can really, really trust, that they've worked with for a long time. You know, because my agent was trying to get me to do a project in LA and a project in New York at the same time, and I was like, logistically, how is that going to work?
I was gonna say that sounds like crazy.
Yeah, yeah, no, like that, like I'm setting myself up for failure. And what I don't
Right.
want to do is like set myself up for failure, like knowingly. Like I'm so down for a challenge, you know, but I don't want to knowingly set myself up for failure. And I also don't want to leave my team hanging, because that sucks. You know, I've been on a team where you know, someone might be doing multiple jobs and it sucks because people are coming to you for answers and you're like, I don't know, let me find the costume designer, you know? And like that's not a good feeling. And I understand like why people do it, because it's like, yo, when you're hot and you gotta like strike while the iron's hot, get your money
Right.
and do what you gotta do. But for me, I just don't think it makes, for me and the way I like to work, I don't think it makes sense and it's not sustainable at this moment. You know, maybe in a few years, if I'm on a show and the show has had multiple seasons, I can go off and like do a movie real quick and come back. I don't know. But right now, it's not sustainable for me in the way I like to work.
You keep saying you have a team. Like, do you work with the same people for each project? Like, what how do you mean you have a team?
Yeah, so I tend to work with at least some of the same people, and we might hire a few new people, but I try to keep like the core group the same, just because like there's a level of like familiarity and trust. You know, you need to know that like when you're not around for any reason, like whether it be you have meetings or you have fittings, like people are going to have your back and like hold you down, you know, and be able to, you know, execute, and won't be scared to talk to the director and won't be scared to talk to accounting and the producers. So I tend to work with the same costume supervisor. We've been working together for like 10 years. Um, Her name is Tuesday Naper. I have a costumer that I've worked with, and he's traveled with me a few times. Um, so at least I know I have one person on set that I know can handle themselves, and also just knows how I like things, and you know, and has no problem communicating with me. Because I find sometimes when people have worked with you for the first time, they try to like they try to like kiss your ass and try to act like sometimes they know everything and they're not really like communicative in the way they need to be communicative, you know? So sometimes it can cause problems inadvertently. And it's like they may have the best intentions, but I kind of need someone who's like, yo, this is what's going on. It's kind of crazy. I need you to do this and I need your help. And, you know, because sometimes I don't know what's going on set, you know? And they need me to like step in and talk to the director or talk to the ADs even and be like, yo, you can't treat my people like this, you know? And I have no problem doing that. And sometimes, you know, people want to protect the costume designer. And I'm like, yo, I'm not fragile like that. Like, I'd rather know what's going on. And if I can help, you know, because I hate that there is like sometimes a weird hierarchy. And sometimes certain people in your department aren't respected like you are as a department head. I don't like it. And I don't go for it and I don't tolerate it. So if I need to have a conversation with someone, I will. And Tuesday's the same way. She's like, no. So yeah, like I try to work with some of the same people. I mean, but I also enjoy meeting new people and working with new people. But you know, I think it's just important just because of the way we work and how much time you spend with people. It's really important to have a few people in there in the mix that you trust, that you work with on a regular basis, that kind of know how things go and know the shorthand, you know?
What are some of the differences between working on a TV show and a film?
TV shows are crazy. The pace of a TV show is much faster than that of a film. When you're doing a film, you have like a couple weeks of prep and then you start shooting. And as you're shooting a film, you might still be prepping and doing fittings. They're flying in cast and day players last minute and stuff like that. But once you start shooting a film, you know, you have one script and you're working off that script. You know, there may be dialogue changes. They may add a scene here and there, but you know, you kind of know you have this one script and this is what you're doing, right? When you're doing a TV show, you're getting a new script like every week. And you are prepping the new episode while you're shooting the previous episode. So it's kind of nuts. I mean, once you get used to the pace of it, you're like, okay, this is how it goes. But you know, if it's your first time working on a show, it can be pretty daunting. And scary even. You're like, wait, what? You know, but once you are in the mind frame of like, okay, this is the pace, you're like, okay, cool, this is the pace, this is how we're shooting. All right. We started shooting today. My new script comes in 2 days. I start prepping and we start shooting that script next Tuesday, you know? And yeah, it's pretty wild how TV runs.
Do you have a preference between TV and film?
I think I prefer film just because of the amount of time I get to like sit with the characters, you know? With TV, it's a little like wham bam, you know? But I enjoy TV as well because, you know, with it being so like fast and furious, the cool thing about TV is that it's constantly changing, you know? Like it's constantly changing. And when you get the scripts, you're like, oh shit. Cause you know, we're reading, you know, for example, I did Raising Dion. So when I read the big, you know, plot twist, I'm in my office like, oh shit, you know? So like that's fun. It's a lot of fun. And then I get to talk to the actor about it in the fitting because like they're just finding out about it too. So yeah, like it's, you know, so they're fun in different ways, but I enjoy like the time and preparation I get to sit with, you know, characters in film.
Do you have the same scale of support that you have on a TV show versus a film?
Yeah, it's about the same.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean,
double the work.
The amount of support you have just really depends on how big the project is, how many actors you have, how many background you have, you know. But okay. You know, at the core, I had assistant costume designer, that's unfortunately who I heard pass this morning was my assistant costume designer on Raising
I'm
Dion.
so sorry to hear that.
Yeah, it's crazy. So Yeah, so you'll have assistant costume designers, costume supervisor, PA, costumers, coordinator, so it's pretty much the same structure. Yeah, it's pretty much the same structure. Like the amount of costumers you have on set just depends on how many actors and background you have.
Okay, so we'll go quickly since you have limited time. Can you talk a little bit about how you do your job with short films? Did you start out doing any shorts?
Yeah, I did a few shorts, and occasionally I'll do a short, for a friend. Not as much anymore. I haven't done a short in a couple years. It's kind of the same process. It's really just like doing it's like doing one or two scenes of a film. You know what I mean? So
Got it.
or like some shorts have 5 scenes, whatever. It just depends on how it's written. You could do a short that's like one long scene, or you could do a short that's got 10 scenes in it.
And would you say that they should follow the same rule of like scaling their wardrobe budget the way that features do? Like 2% of your budget should go to costumes. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's fair and that makes sense. And I think that, but it also really just depends. Like if you wrote a short that, and in the short, there's a lot going on costume wise. Like I did a short, it wasn't a short actually, it was a pilot, but it was about a Black man in space. So I had to build a spacesuit. So, like they had to allocate more money towards that. So that's why I'm saying it's kind of hard to use, like you can start there, but your costume designer may come back to you and be like, well, actually you have this idea in the script for this particular kind of costume, and this is how much that costume is going to cost. And you might have to go back and forth and negotiate and find more money for them, or you got to cut the thing.
What tips can you offer, like costume designers that are working with ridiculously low budgets on these short films?
I would just say learn technical skills, because that's going to help you out. If you don't know how to sew and age and dye and do a lot of things on your own, just really learn technical skills. And also, learn your resources, like take advantage of all the thrift stores and the discount stores and the by the pound places where you can get, pounds and pounds of things for like $100, like just really take advantage of your resources. Leverage your relationships, try to have good relationships with independent designers and brands, and see if they'll let you borrow things. So yeah, that I would just say, like, really just be good at finding inexpensive resources, having like really dope technical skills, and managing and leveraging relationships with designers.
Okay, great. And can you talk a bit about how you get work? Like, I'm assuming you have an agent now. Did they approach you? Did you find one?
Yeah, so I just signed with WME, which is
wow! Congratulations!
Let's go.
So I'm really excited about it. And then
amazing.
Like I got signed, and then it was like Corona. I was like, So I was actually referred to WME by 2 different people, by a producer I worked with and a production designer I worked with on the Fred Hampton project. They were like, you are dope. Like you need to be at one of these top agencies because you're that talented. Why aren't you there? And I'm like, I don't know. Make me an introduction. And I had an agent, but I was at a different agency, and I'm really grateful to that agent. He helped me a lot and helped me get to this place, but I don't he didn't really fully understand me as an artist, I don't think. And at WME, the kinds of conversations I'm having with my new agent are like the conversations I've been wanting to have with an agent for years.
Nice.
Yeah, it's been really, really cool. So I'm really happy about it. But before I had an agent, I was getting work through my personal network. Like I was getting work through working. I would get referred for jobs. I would keep in touch with, people I enjoyed working with. And a lot of times that would end up in a referral for a job. So, most of it is referral based, and you like networking. And networking in like, when I say networking, I don't mean like you're like trying to force anything. I mean like you genuinely like connect with people on a project and you're like, hey, can we keep in touch? Because if it feels forced, it's just not gonna, for me, it doesn't work out, you know, if I don't genuinely enjoy working with the person, or we don't like connect and have great conversations. um you know, like there's a showrunner and writer that I worked with when I was a PA, and we're still in touch. And he and I connect like maybe once or twice a year, you know, in whatever city, like it's LA or New York, and we just have tea or coffee and or drink and like hang out. And you know, and we've been doing this for the last couple of years. And the last time we did this, you know, I showed him like a bunch of my work, and you know, mind you, he'd seen me, you know, go from being a PA to a costume designer. And when I showed him, you know, my recent work from the Fred Hampton project, he was like, "Oh my God, I'm so proud of you, and I love this, and we're gonna figure out a way to work together." And I'm like,
Nice.
"Cool." But you know, and that's just off of just like a genuine connection. So you kind of have um, to let you know those things, those relationships build over time, and let them breathe and not try to force it, you know. But at the same time, you can be very vocal about like, hey, I enjoyed working with you and I would love to do it again, you know what I mean? And that's why I'm saying, for me, it has to be very genuine. And 9 times out of 10, if you're good at like keeping up with people, they'll refer you for jobs, like because you'll be top of mind, you know, just checking in like, hey, how's it going, blah 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 blah. And a week or two later you might get a call and like, so and so gave me your name. It literally happens like that. So I, you know, you don't have to have an agent to get work. You just have to be really good at networking and just like keeping in touch with people and letting people know what you're doing, what you want to do. And I'm not even like the best at it, to be honest. Like that's also something I'm trying to be better at, because I just get like in the zone and just like work. And sometimes I slack off on keeping up the personal connections. So like that's also part of my self-care right now, is like keeping up with people I really love working with, really speaking to, because it does help you in the long run career wise, maintaining
Mm.
relationships.
So we have just one last question. What is the Black Designer Database?
Awesome. So on most of my projects, I try my best to use Black designers to give them some shine and get them on like actors and celebrities, because I know a lot of times like visibility is an issue for Black designers. Some of them don't have formal training, but they have amazing product, or they just don't know how to get their foot in the door. They don't know how to get their stuff on people. So that's something I've been doing quietly for the last couple of years. And then it's been interesting because I've worked with a couple of directors. Like, for example, Stefan was like, I want to use Black designers. Can you use as many Black designers as possible? And I was like, yeah, I was going to anyway. And so for that film, I ended up using a lot of Black designers. I even collaborated with a couple Black designers on pieces. And I also had a Black artist paint on a lot of clothes. So, you know, I've been doing it for a while, and I just kept putting a call out every time I do a project, like for Black designers. And then one day I was like, well, why not just start a database? And just track it. And so that's what I've been doing along with my assistant. And we're still like in super beta, like startup, like we're just still collecting data. Like that's where we're at. We're collecting data. We're working right now collecting all the data of Black designers around the country making masks city by city, and try to put a PDF or something out really soon, because you know a lot of people want to buy Black right now, which is totally understandable and dope. And a lot of people want to buy masks and because they can't sew or whatever. Or do they just want to support young designers? So that's what it is. Like the goal, like the future goal is for it to be accessible to everyone, and for it to be accessible industry wide, because most of the designers that have signed up for the database or have input their information want their stuff on camera. And they want to be in, have stylists and costume designers see their work.
Gotcha. That sounds amazing. Please keep us posted on that.
Yeah, hopefully we can find people in the future for our projects too, That would be amazing.
Yeah, I mean that's the goal, is that, it makes, if everyone's kind of in one place, it makes it easy for people to go to one place to find Black designers if that's what they want.
Mm-hmm.
And, there wasn't anything like that. So yeah, but like I said, we're still in the period of collecting data, and I think what we're gonna do is like release, pieces of the database, like centered around like specific needs. So right now it's masks.
Where can people find you on the internet?
Oh, sure. So my Instagram is my name, Charlese Antoinette, CharleseAntoinette. I'm on IMDb as Charlese Antoinette Jones. If you want to look me up on IMDb and see the projects that I've done. I have a website that also has the projects that I've done listed and trailers and things like that. And that's my name, CharleseAntoinette.com.
Well, thank you so much, Charlese, for joining us on the Black Film Space podcast.
Thank you. I had fun.
This entire interview, I'm just like really excited. I'm just learning a lot, and I really appreciate your passion and enthusiasm for what you do. And yeah, it's such a necessary component of filmmaking, and I think a lot of audience members maybe not realize that or appreciate that. So we appreciate you, and we appreciate you being on the podcast.
All right. Bye, Charlese. Thank you so much. This is awesome.
Thanks for listening to the Black Film Space podcast. If you're interested in being part of our community and attending events, please visit us at blackfilmspace.com and follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at Black Film Space. Subscribe to our email list and podcast. All right. See you soon.